I want to talk about ProFound, and I want to learn about this expanded proteome concept. You joined the company last year. The company was founded in 2020. What was sort of you mentioned already that you walked in and you saw an opportunity in the science and in the discovery that you thought would be huge. What exactly was that? Like, what was it that flipped the switch in you, the premise of ProFound that flipped the switch in your brain that said, this is what I'm going after?
Yeah, sure. So first off, the name, I didn't come up with it. I inherited it, but I love it. And first I thought it was a little bit presumptuous, but it isn't intended to be at all. It's really to signal we're finding proteins profound with an intent to have a profound impact on patients. And it kind of encapsulates the whole thing for my team. And that's one of the things that I brought to the company is really talking about the transition from pure platform company. And we're still a platform company, but it was a pure platform company when the platform was being created. But now we're in transition from a platform company to a platform company and a pipeline company. Mm-hmm. And, my job is to really make sure both things thrive. I'll tell you more about the platform, but also to make sure there's visible, tangible products coming out that everyone sees as valuable to patients and therefore valuable as a business. And, the first, I'd say, recognition of that was the deal we recently did with Pfizer, which we could talk about later. Mm-hmm. They're the first to really recognize that, and there will be others, I'm sure. But what we do is, as you introduced at the beginning, we started with the premise that there's 20,000 known proteins from the Human Genome Project about 2 decades ago. But when they did that project, and with enormous respect, and that was such an important landmark in science, they necessarily need to have some rules where they defined what a protein needs to be included in their list. Mm-hmm. And they were restrictive rules by design. It turns out if you relax the rules a little bit, then you start to say, well, wait a minute, there might be other types of proteins. And as you alluded to, there are many types of RNA that we thought. There's one class called long non-coding RNA, mm-hmm. meaning it doesn't code a protein. It turns out that it looks like probably hundreds or thousands of them actually encode a protein, which is what we've defined. And the way we did it was we developed a particular technology. It's called RiboSeq. I'll just spare the details, but it's a way of identifying proteins in the process of being translated. Mm-hmm. It's therefore unbiased. And we find all the 20,000 known, but also everything that's now newly described. And there's literally tens of thousands of other ones. And what we have is a platform that enables us to rapidly, through a database, attribute sort of in silico potential function to them. And then we have a platform to do experimental assessment to see what they really do. And we have a heavy dose of looking at which ones have human genetic evidence for being causal in disease. That's one of the things I brought to the table is because at GSK, I was leading on the collaboration we had with 23andMe. Mm-hmm. So, this approach of using genetics to really pick the most promising targets is one that I've utilized here as well. So, look, it's no longer a theoretical proposition. We've identified quite a number now of novel proteins that have drug-like properties, where the protein itself could be a drug, or drug target-like properties where we're making antibodies against them, for example.
Super exciting, yeah. When I talk with the leaders of platform companies, I've often had the conversation around whether the pipeline development is sort of like a floor model, or whether there's intent beyond demonstration. What's the take at ProFound?
Excuse me, do you mean the floor model in the sense
floor model is in the sense that, like, a company will create a platform and they the platform is onto something. It can make important discoveries. It's capable, the technology is capable of moving the needle, right? Moving the ball downfield. But we don't necessarily have, we theoretically, we don't necessarily have the intent to take the ball any further than discovery,
Yeah.
let someone else develop a pipeline. We'll be happy to sell our platform as a service or to partner.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like I've had conversations where, it's been put to me point blank. We did that. We couldn't get anybody to get on board, so we said, well, let's demonstrate it via
Yes.
a pipeline, a candidate,
Yeah.
develop a candidate.
Got it. Sure. Yeah.
To prove the theory.
Yeah.
But the intent isn't necessarily to say, well, we're going to have a follow-on candidate. We're going to have a candidate beyond that. We're going to build an entire pipeline. So I'm looking for like what the sense is at ProFound. You said that your role right now is kind of two-part in terms of the platform product and also developing the pipeline. Would ProFound, and maybe it's too early to say, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would ProFound like to develop a pipeline?
Yeah. Let me put it this way. The science is applicable across every therapeutic indication, every therapeutic area. And at the moment, we focus predominantly on oncology, immunology, and metabolic disease, but it's equally applicable across the others. And there's no way any single company could prosecute all of that. Sure. So, for example, there's no company who could take all the 20,000 proteins. There's like many dozens of companies working on that space. Yeah. So it's not, we won't be a company that owns it all, takes it all, never partners anything. We've already partnered with Pfizer. So, I think to maximize opportunity for patients, we're going to have to do some combination of internal activities, partnerships with the right people. And that's where the BD thing comes in. It's a matter of, for each area and even each asset, what's the most efficient way to get it to patients, which almost always means everybody makes money also, and it's a good business model. So we're going to be exploring and implementing different business models across that space. But, it is early and we have optionality across all of it. But yeah, that's what's fun about this. There's going to be lots of great press releases for you to follow over
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, my opinion is being formed along the way. Early on, I thought, well, I don't know how much I want to, how much focus I want to put on pure platform companies, because I'm the intent of the podcast is to talk with companies that are developing therapeutics. As sort of to your point, it's exciting. The optionality is there, and as I learn more about this and see the companies that are coming on board and perhaps going to build a pipeline, maybe not, maybe just going to partner, maybe a combination of all of the above. Maybe it doesn't matter so much, right? Like the science is cool.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't know what you're going to find in the platform. I mean, to exaggerate for effect, there's like a range of what platforms can do. The worst case scenario is you spend 4 or 5 years making a platform that's really only enabled to make one asset. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not exactly probably the best use of capital. That's just like some amazing asset. But then it's not really a platform. It's more of that was the research to get to the asset. Yeah. The other extreme, I think, is where we are, where the platform has been successful. You identify this whole new area of science, and now you've got like dozens and dozens of target and drug opportunities. And again, that's where I think we're going to necessarily need a mixed model of some sort and variable sort. And yeah, it'll be fun.
To just look at this point blank without the benefit of conversation and learning, to look at what ProFound is looking to do and what it's discovered and what it's looking to capitalize on. It's easy to overstate, right? I think from my perspective, it would be easy to overstate, like, wow, there's a whole new world of proteins that have yet to be prosecuted, yet to be, researched and applied. That's it's revolutionary. It's, pick your adjective, right?
Right.
It's easy to overstate. So I want some perspective on that, some pragmatic perspective. Like how do you characterize this opportunity in terms of sort of historical reference points? Is it comparable to the quote unquote discovery of X or the development of?
Look, at the risk of going down the same track that you're describing of overstating it, let me just frame it this way. For the 20,000 known proteins, and I've seen different numbers, but they sort of center somewhere around 400 or so of the proteins have become drug targets. So a small fraction. If from these tens of thousands of proteins, there could be even a quarter of that or half of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fundamentally important for patients.
Yeah.
And let's just leave it at that. The opportunity is very, very big. Is it, as big as the genome project of this or that? I'll be extremely happy when there's dozens of medicines that come out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you like how do you layer in? We're going to talk about the Pfizer deal and sort of where that lays in terms of the therapeutic discipline of that
Sure.
deal. But how have you navigated sort of the disciplines you mentioned earlier, immunology and oncology and metabolic disease? I guess the question would be how and when do you determine like, hey, what we're discovering has applicability in these specific disciplines and why?
Yeah. Yeah. So we set out to work in these three disciplines, oncology, immunology, and metabolism, with a very specific approach and strategy in mind. First off is in oncology, you'll be aware of the rising importance of the class called antibody drug conjugates, or ADCs,
Mm-hmm.
that have been really revolutionary for oncology patients. And there it's an antibody that's engineered with a toxin on it to kill cancer cells, but based on there being a cancer-specific antigen. So the ADC could kill the cancer cell, but not normal, healthy tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Revolutionary, HER2 and others. But there's only about 10 targets in that whole field. And almost every day you see a press release of somebody buying one for 100 million or a billion, depending what phase. And what companies are doing now, they're doing their best to find additional targets. But that's been very, very hard. And what there is a lot of momentum on is iterating on the modality, on the antibody, like
Mm-hmm.
the next generation. What we're bringing to the table in oncology is a new set of antigens, of targets. And the way we did this is by identifying novel proteins as I've described.
Yeah.
And we found quite a few that are expressed on cancer and not healthy. And they're ones that no one else has seen before. And we're starting antibody drug discovery programs and have ADC programs in flight. And it's very exciting because, if for a field where there's only 10 or so, adding 2, 3, or 4 more is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's why we started there. And then the other thing we're doing is finding in immunology, as you know, many of the drugs target circulating cytokines or their receptors. And they're definitely not easy, but they're relatively easy compared with small molecules, which are, you need tons of chemists and it's hard work to make the molecule. And, you've got tissue penetration issues, et cetera, PK. We're relatively straightforward. And we've identified through our platform, I mentioned very briefly the database, but once we identify these small proteins, we know tons about them. For example, we know if they have a signal peptide and therefore look like they would be secreted. So we could very quickly figure out which ones are produced by T or B cells, have a signal peptide, and have a genetic association with human disease. That's like fabulous as a starting point for a drug discovery program. And that's what we're doing in immunology.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So, the modality, that you'll choose is not, that's not necessarily predetermined or biased going in.
We've biased our selection of targets to those that are amenable to an antibody.
Mm-hmm.
There's many of these that are intracellular, and that might be targets for small molecules, oligos, degraders, that we're putting less emphasis on at the moment, but there's many of them. And that's the kind of thing where partnerships might be really important.
Yeah. 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 And the part I want to get back to a question around the BD and the partnership approach in the context of this, this discovery, this new discovery that hasn't necessarily, to your point, that the translatome is in bits and pieces in the literature, but it's not like you don't go to J.P. Morgan, for instance, and start talking translatome and just
Right.
seeing heads nod in
Yeah.
all of your
Yes.
meetings. You're just not going to see that.
Yeah.
It's new, it's new. So, when a new approach to developing therapeutics is presented, the risk in terms of partnership and funding is sort of ratcheted up a notch. And you've said, it's BD's tough. It's a hard business. How is ProFound, and in the context of ProFound's relationship with Flagship, how are you uniquely situated to embrace the risk of pursuing science that some in the traditional space might consider a bit too soon or early for significant investment?
Yeah, there's a lot there, but maybe I could give you
Yeah,
some
no, that was
insight
a
to how we
very
think about it.
it was a very wordy question.
No, yeah, maybe, but there's just a lot of elements there that I could sort of tease out. Let me see if I could give some structure to it. First off, in terms of the interactions with say, with pharma, it all depends on getting to the right people.
Mm,
Because if you get the right scientists who understand what we're doing, that you usually see the light bulbs go up, like, oh, that really? Wow. Okay, tell me more. And sometimes it takes, the second conversation where the first group is like, well, that's interesting. I don't know. Then they talk with their colleagues and they come back and they say, oh yeah, okay, now we want to see the. So it's a little bit iterative. And I think that's common in a new space where you need to take a few bites at the apple to really understand it. So that's one. Number two is, what I think a lot of pharma will be doing is thinking about what's their process for identifying new targets versus what we bring to the table. And as I described, we could, in silico, through our database, very rapidly frame up key elements of a target that in the past might have taken years to get those data around. So once people understand that, they're like, okay, wow, you're saying you could give me a list of X number of targets that have A, B, and C and D features that I'm looking for. I'm like, yeah, we can do that tomorrow. So that's like very attractive.
mm-hmm.
And then your point about, is it maybe early to invest? And again, I think the Pfizer deal exemplifies why for many it might not be, is that one element is that some of the proteins themselves will be the drug. Think like insulin, GLP-1, GIP.
Mm-hmm.
These things are peptides that are administered, and it's not like you've got to create a lot of new composition of matter. So there's a more rapid route to using the protein as a drug. So that's one element. Look, people are going to be doing drug discovery for some time. And where a lot of the companies are stuck now is they're competing with each other on the same targets. And I knew that really well. Like every target presentation would have a big section on, okay, where's Pfizer, where's Merck, where's Novo, right down the line. And everything we have, like no one is working on it by definition because it's new.
Yeah.
And that's attractive.
Yeah. Was that part of the, and that's a great segue to the Pfizer deal. You mentioned that everyone's competing on the same targets, and I mean the GLP-1 space is probably a prime example there. So was that kind of key to Pfizer's interest in ProFound and what you're doing, that sort of novel target?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
the whole proposition is novel target, novel mechanism of action, complementary to GLP-1.
Yeah.
GLP-1s have been fabulous. I mean, it's just amazing. I worked on one at GSK years ago. The percent weight loss and what we're seeing now is pretty phenomenal, but it can't be the only mechanism that could lead to benefits for patients with obesity. Mm-hmm. So there has to be orthogonal mechanisms. And that one is, acts centrally, but finding proteins that act locally, for example, on fat, is something that, there's enormous opportunity for novelty and to be first in class.
So tell us. I put the cart in front of the horse here,
No
Dr.
worries.
Lepore. I jumped right into this Pfizer deal and made the GLP-1 reference, and I don't think we framed up the context of this deal. It's in the obesity space.
Yep.
So I'm going to allow you. I'm going to hit rewind and then allow you to take it.
Okay.
Where you would normally start with the explanation of the Pfizer deal.
Well, I think we were both complicit in jumping to the end, but so
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll conspire to go back to the beginning.
I appreciate it.
Look, this. Let me go back even further. We have a very we being Flagship Pioneering, and by the way, my role is constructed in a very cool way where I'm CEO of ProFound Therapeutics, but I'm also have a role that's called CEO partner in Flagship.
Hmm.
And it's intentionally designed that way so that I have visibility and ability to contribute to other things Flagship are doing.
Hmm.
So, as in my wearing my Flagship hat, I think it was about a year ago, Flagship and Pfizer put together a deal where each contributed 50 million, and so there's a 100 million pool that could be applied to drug discovery programs that come out of any part of Flagship.
Hmm.
And the idea was, look, Pfizer are just outstanding in terms of drug discovery, drug development capabilities. They're interested in first-in-class medicines. Flagship have all these creative platforms that are generating ideas, molecules, and potentially assets. And then the idea is use this 100 million to fund 10 asset-specific programs.
I think you alluded a bit to the differentiator with this early program with Pfizer that you're working on, how it's sort of differentiated from the central application of Ozempic. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what is it about this specific project that
Yeah.
piques Pfizer's interest?
Yeah, look, we haven't disclosed any further details of the science and exactly what we have and what we're looking for. But I could maybe frame it up a little bit more in the sense that the, the enormous value of our platform is to identify things you couldn't have construed were there. That's the point. They're novel. So, it wouldn't make sense for us to say, well, okay, let's find GLP-1. There's 10 GLP-1s.
Yeah.
The point is to find novel proteins that regulate the pathogenesis of obesity that could be used, orthogonally with GLP-1.
Yeah.
And our platform enables us to identify potential proteins that could do that. And then we'll have a screening mechanism for identifying them, but we haven't disclosed anything beyond that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's safe for us to assume that it's different and frankly better. I mean, to your point, like I think it wasn't too long ago I read that Hims has come out with a super price competitive GLP-1 offering, like $111 a month or something like this.
Right.
I mean, that happened quickly, right? Like that
Not
space,
surprising though. Yeah.
not surprising at all. Yeah.
But for some, that business model makes sense. If you want, 0.5% of, 50 billion market, you can make math work for a certain company, but that's not what we do. We're here for novel targets and novel biology.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, what's sort of the next step in that partnership? Like,
Well, the next step is to do the work and identify what we're looking for, move it along, us to get milestones, Pfizer to get great assets, and rinse and repeat.
So there's a whole bunch of next steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. So we've talked a little bit about sort of some of the hints as to the indications, modalities that you guys might be leaning into. Do you have any other in the works plans that can be shared in terms of sort of the productization of either the platform or its discoveries?
Yeah, look, again, the oncology stuff is really exciting, and we'll be seeing that progress over the next, years, months and years. I talked about immunology, how we're focusing on secreted molecules or receptors for secreted molecules, and the human genetic insights to how to pick those is really exciting. So that's something we'll be really pushing. And then in metabolism beyond obesity, there's really important opportunity to think about molecules that affect muscle, for example, or other organ systems. So that's an area we're working on. And then, the platform's amenable to so many other areas, and we'll be creatively finding ways to build value in those areas too.